A report reveals that in 2021, during Ivan Duque's administration, 92 massacres were registered and at least 168 social leaders were assassinated. A recently published study contrasting Cuba's and the United States' COVID-19 response affirms that the Caribbean island had a better outcome facing the virus and states the pandemic uncovered serious underlying health inequalities in the U.S. And the nuclear discussions have resumed in Vienna, with Iran insisting on making a truly lasting and mutually assuring agreement focused on the lifting of the U.S. sanctions. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Colombia, the annual report from the Institute of Peace Studies and Development in the past reveals that some 92 massacres were perpetrated in the country and at least 48 signatories of the peace agreements were killed during 2021. In the study titled Figures of Violence in the Regions 2021, in the past gathers events that occurred during the 1st of January and December 24th. The document details that at least 326 people died in these massacres, which occurred in 20 departments of the country. The assassinations against local leaders were concentrated in 108 municipalities, where at least 55 indigenous people, 29 community leaders, and 37 leaders of different social organizations lost their lives. In Mexico, the relatives of the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa have started a protest at the Basilica of Guadalupe 87 months after the events. The demonstrators walk along the Guadalupano corridor in Mexico City to denounce that the investigation is not over. Upon arriving at the esplanade of the Basilica of Guadalupe, the priest Raúl Viera officiated a mass, where he blamed the authorities for the disappearance of the students in 2014 during the 6-year term of Enrique Peña Nieto. The government at the time blamed corrupt police and the Guerreros Unidos cartel, which allegedly killed and burnt them in the garbage dump in Cocula. This version was denied by President López Obrador, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and the interdisciplinary group of independent experts. The Peruvian economy will grow above forecasts and will lead the economic recovery of the South American region in 2021, as was announced by Peruvian financial authorities in the last report of the year. The document, prepared by the Central Reserve Bank, foresees an increase in the growth projection from 11.9% to 13.2% due to a rapid recovery of the productive activity. On a macroeconomic level, the president of the financial institution, Julio Velarde, pointed out that there are sectors that have recovered strongly, such as construction and manufacturing, but there are others that have not yet taken off, such as services and trade. According to the data prepared by the institution, by the end of 2021, Peru will grow by 13.2%, followed by Chile with 11.5% and Colombia with 9.3%. Argentina's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has reiterated its offer to carry out humanitarian flights in the Falkland Island, the Maldives, and confirms that it has everything in place to allow residents to travel to their cities of origin to see to matters of interest. The government has offered 2 charter flights with Argentinian Airlines to solve the problem of the Falkland, the Maldives residents, mostly of Chilean origin, and who have been stranded since the beginning of the pandemic. Since March 2020, when the first COVID-19 quarantine came into effect, all regular flights to the island were suspended. And for this reason, the coordination of humanitarian flights has been recommended. In reiterating the proposal, the Argentinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs remarked that its offer intends to contribute to overcome the negative consequences of the pandemic. The Venezuelan president reported that cooperation mechanisms will be reactivated among all Arab and South American countries in 2022.
Has held the presidency of the Forum of Arab and South American Countries, for several years. The Foreign Ministry will adopt a set of initiatives in 2022 to reactivate the cooperation mechanisms along the Arab countries and all of South America, so that we can build the ties agreed upon in the areas of finance, currency, investment, commerce, and flight routes. I believe that we can do many things in the years to come, and I believe that we are going to do them.
The Venezuelan president also informed that he plans to visit Iran in 2022 to meet with his counterpart Ebrahim Raisi.
We have agreed on a set of new plans. The Joint Commission between the two countries is working on new plans to develop relations and cooperation between Iran and Venezuela. I will travel to Tehran very soon because President Raisi has already invited me for us to meet face to face. We will hold talks, sign new agreements, new documents to accelerate processes of cooperation at all levels, in all spheres of collaboration between two independent and sovereign countries, two nations that are fighters, Iran and Venezuela.
Now we move on to other topics. The governor of Bahia, Rui Costa, has warned of an unprecedented flood disaster as the emergency situation has already been declared in 72 cities, 58 of which are underwater. Following the impact of the rains, the state has decreed 72 cities in emergency conditions. With this declaration, the mobilization of all state agencies has been authorized to support disaster response and the recovery actions. Up to this Sunday, there were almost 20,000 people who had to leave their homes and who do not necessarily need shelter, and also 16,000 had lost their homes. The National Meteorological Institute and the National Center for Monitoring and Warning of Natural Disasters are maintaining the alert for the risk of new floods and landslides in Bahia due to the accumulated rains in the last few days and also the forecast of new precipitations. A snowstorm in the United States caused the closure of highways in the states of Nevada and California. In the city of Reno, authorities warned of difficulties of traveling to Sierra Nevada. They also informed that 3 people were injured in a collision that involved at least 20 vehicles. Meanwhile, the California Department of Transportation also closed down any passage to the mountain, explaining that the roads were too slippery for drivers. In this way, the Meteorological Service issued a warning for winter storm for the metropolitan area of Lake Tahoe until Tuesday morning. Likewise, the competent authorities explained that the fall weather conditions are present from San Diego all the way to Seattle. We'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. A recently published study contrasting Cuba's and the United States' COVID-19 response affirms that the Caribbean island had a better outcome facing the virus and states the pandemic uncovered serious underlying health inequalities in the U.S. The study, posted on the American Public Health Association website, highlights Cuba's public health values, like community-level care, preventive and instructive advertising, messages to the population and door-to-door inquiry that allow to follow the infections chains. On the other hand, U.S. health system does not provide attention for everyone and varies according to local government decisions, which makes more uneven the COVID-19 response. The study acknowledges Cuba's government's expedited response after the first case was detected and the economic measures taken that allow the population to undergo the mandatory quarantine. It also contrasts the vaccine production, media coverage and instructions, testing, isolation, contact tracing and quarantining, as well as surveillance and case detection. Starting on January 1st, Bolivia will demand the necessary controls in order to provide everyone older than 18 years of age with their vaccination certificate against COVID-19. Bolivian authorities have also explained that in the frame of current legal norms, if a person decides to exercise the right to not be vaccinated, but decides to be attended for whatever reason in a private or public institution, they should then present their negative PCR test certificate 48 hours prior to the consult or activity they demand. Officials also informed that the vaccination card, operating with a QR code, is being habilitated for those already vaccinated. The nation's health minister, Jason Auza, explained that the law to be put in motion from the very first day of 2022 onwards aims at containing the pandemic in a more effective way.
The full vaccination scheme must be demanded by any and all places where there is a great confluence of people. This is private financial entities, religious congregations, supermarkets, and other places of purchase, educational institutions, and entertainment facilities.
Marking the International Day of Epidemic Preparedness, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated how quickly an infectious disease can sweep across the world, push health systems to the brink, and upend daily life for all of the humanity.
Revealed our failure to learn the lessons of recent health emergencies like SARS, avian influenza, Zika, Ebola, and others. And it reminded us that the world remains woefully unprepared to stop localized outbreaks from spilling across borders and spiraling into global pandemic. COVID-19 will not be the last pandemic humanity will face. Infectious diseases remain a clear and present danger to every country. And as we respond to this health crisis, we need to prepare for the next one.
Omicron, the COVID-19 variant confirmed in over 160 countries, according to the latest report from the World Health Organization, is now also causing major losses in the global aircraft industry, as more than 8,000 flights were suspended in the last hours, with Europe being the most affected region, due to both the infection rates and the strain in flights. The spike in the new variant's numbers is taking a toll in flight crews and seat purchases, which forced the interruption of flights on Christmas weekend. 57% of total world suspensions have taken place in Europe. Continent that also registers in the last week 3,022,868 Omicron infections, the highest progression of cases, followed by the United States and Canada, which have already surpassed 1 million contagions. With these statistics in mind, European health authorities have tightened restrictions and the contagion measures, as well as increased vaccination rates and calls for awareness. In Russia, Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov affirmed on Monday that NATO represents a geopolitical project dedicated to the adhesion of territories that achieve independence after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. The Russian Foreign Minister said the West might cause an armed conflict in Ukraine to try to accuse Russia and thus have an excuse to impose fresh sanctions that will affect Moscow's economy. Lavrov also assured that some European governments, which he described as irrational, push the West to adopt coercive measures against Russia, while warning that these measures will have counteraction. This December 26, groups in the United States protesting armed violence demanded more action from President Joe Biden to avoid new firearms-related incidents, given the rise in violent crimes. During his campaign, the President Joe Biden committed himself to reduce crimes carried out with lethal weapons. In mid-June, the head of state issued executive orders to regulate arms carriage. The U.S. reported over 43,000 deaths between January and November 2021, the deadliest year of last decade, according to the Armed Violence Archive. However, the nation's Congress, despite these numbers, has not boosted any laws or initiatives that could limit the ownership of firearms. A UK firm is closer to offering global internet via satellites. A Russian Soyuz rocket on Monday took 36 more satellites from British operator OneWeb into orbit, bringing the company more than halfway towards its goal of providing global broadband internet. The London headquartered company is working to complete the construction of a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites, providing enhanced broadband and other services to countries around the planet. The UK company plans for its global commercial internet service to be operational by next year, supported by some 650 satellites. OneWeb is competing the race to provide fast internet for the world's remote areas via satellites. Arianespace, which has worked with Russia for close to 2 decades, is under contract to make 16 Soyuz launches between December 2020 and the end of 2022. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Thank you for staying with us. Now we continue. Nuclear discussions have resumed in Vienna, with Iran insisting on making a truly lasting and mutually assuring agreement, focused on the lifting of sanctions that followed the backing out of the U.S. of the deal in 2018. The 8th round of talks in Vienna over the joint nuclear agreement began with tensions in the air as the European parties expressed their hesitancy regarding Tehran's petition to lift the sanctions imposed unilaterally by the Trump administration in 2018. Since late November, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi's government has bet on a clear approach on the subject, guaranteeing a strict abidance to the accord in case it's signed as long as the U.S. keeps up the demand assurances. Despite the importance of the deal for the global geopolitics, Western powers show with their behavior that it's more important for them to economically and commercially suffocate an entire nation, regardless the impact of the citizens, the most affected by this policy line, than to focus on peace and balance. Iran presses on participants to reach an agreement in the Vienna talks that focus on the Persian nation's management of nuclear energy. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh asked the representatives of the involved nations to reach consensus on the will to obtain a good agreement during a press conference in Tehran.
All participants in the negotiations to come to Vienna with the will to obtain a good agreement. What is unbearable for the Islamic Republic of Iran is the fact that some parties are mistaken in their calculations, thinking that they can waste the time and energy of others with their campaigns of false denials or falsifying the facts. We were able to reach 2 new documents based on the documents obtained during the 6 rounds of talks. After intense discussions, Iran's proposals and views were inserted. So we have 2 new documents on the nuclear issue and also on the lifting of sanctions.
The United Nations General Assembly approved by an overwhelming majority the investigation into Israeli war crimes in Palestine, with 125 votes in favor and 8 against. A majority of 125 countries on Thursday backed an unprecedented open investigation into Israel's war crimes, including the 11-day deadly Israeli aggression in the Gaza Strip earlier this year. A total of 193 members voted on Thursday night, and the amendment proposed by Israel was massively rejected by 125 votes to 8 in favor, with 34 abstentions. And Syria condemned the unprecedented colonialist escalation of the Israeli occupation authorities in Golan. The Foreign Minister of Syria slammed the dangerous escalation of Israel's occupation forces in Golan. In the executive statements, the Foreign Ministry reiterated the Syrian government's firm support towards Syrian citizens in the occupied Golan, a region whose inhabitants keep resisting Israel's attempts of colonization, using the annexation of territories and the policy of seizure of lands and property. According to the Foreign Ministry of Syria, Israel will not have reached such a stage in its expansion plans had it not been for the protection granted by one after another U.S. administration. Libyan authorities reported that the lifeless bodies of 28 migrants were found last Saturday on the west coast of Libya after a boat capsized carrying people trying to cross the Mediterranean. Red Crescent teams recovered 28 bodies of migrants who died at the sea, as well as 3 survivors at 2 separate locations on the beaches of Al-Alus, 90 kilometers from the capital, Tripoli. The tragedy occurs after the announcement of the death of 160 migrants due to the shipwreck of their precarious boats, which raises to 1,500 the number of deaths under the same conditions since the beginning of the year. According to the International Organization for Migrations, more than 30,000 people were rescued or intercepted on the coast of the African country. And an outbreak of avian flu in northern Israel killed thousands of migratory birds that remained on Lake Hula, as was reported by the Times of Israel on Monday. Some 5,000 dead cranes were found Sunday in Hula Lake in northern Israel amid an outbreak of bird flu that wiped out about 500,000 chickens and turkeys. Lake Hula is known as a resting and wintering place for tens of thousands of migratory birds from the Nordic countries. Local farmers provide food for these birds to prevent the cranes from ruining their farms, after an outbreak of avian flu killed poultry on farms in the north of the country. Local people continue to feed the migratory birds. Local authorities believe the disease spread from Moshav Margoliot, located on the border with Lebanon, where poultry deaths have been reported since last week. Farmers there had to kill hundreds of thousands of chickens and turkeys. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.